Welcome to this presentation. This presentation is about what to build on the internet computer. As I've said previously, we are here to learn Motoko. We are here to learn how to build a DAO. And so you learn how to code, you write lines of code, you import modules and so on. But the important question is, why are we doing this? And what is the main point of building on ICP? And so this is a question that is actually pretty hard to find an answer, because the answer will depend on what you want to build and your background. Are you like a solo entrepreneur? Are you a company? Do you have background in Ethereum development? Do you already have some dApps on like other layer 1 or layer 2s? And so ICP is Alien Tech. And so there are infinite possibilities. There are infinite things that we could build on the internet computer. And that makes it super hard for someone that is in the position of, I want to learn, but I'm not sure exactly what I want to build. I want to talk about that because I was in this situation, I would say 2-3 years ago when I started to build on the IC. I just saw the potential, but I was not like, okay, I want to build this and I'm fixed and I know this is why I'm using ICP. So this discussion is probably more for people like me. And I've been struggling. I've been looking into all applications built on ICP for the past 2-3 years. I've been looking into their architecture, how they build, been looking into their business model, how they incentivize users and how they make money, because that's still an important part. And so that's why I feel qualified to talk about this topic, but this is just my opinion. And if you are like a startup and you already have a plan, maybe what I'm going to say doesn't apply to you. What I'm talking about really applies to people that just look into the ICP and think, okay, this is amazing, but now what do I build? So there are so many things you could build. There are some examples I can dive into. For example, you could decentralize your website. So this is not something we are doing this week. Well, actually, we are doing it this week, but it's not part of the DAO Adventure, the book, because the DAO Adventure is focused on the backend. It's focused on Motoko. But on Saturday, I will show you how you can deploy a front end. So you can deploy actually a website on the internet computer, and it can be a full web application. So it can be like React, Vue.js, Angular, and you can add internet identity for authentication. So this is essentially an alternative to, like Vercel, or if you deploy your website on your own. And it works pretty great. You can set up a custom domain. What's the point of doing that? The point is that your website would be controllable by a DAO. So you could put your website under the control of a DAO, or you could even put your website under the control of no one if you decide to black hole your canister. You could create a smart wallet. A smart wallet is, I think, the next generation of wallets. So right now, wallets are like extension in your browser, but honestly, this is bad user experience, and it's not the future of how wallet will work. A canister is a perfect wallet. Why? Because a canister can access funds from any chains. So for example, you could have your canister that stores Bitcoin, stores Ethereum, ICP, of course, but also other cryptocurrencies and from any chains. In theory, there is no limit to the number of chains that ICP can integrate with. But the second part is that the canister is actually smart. So it's not just like a wallet extension. You can actually program like a subscription, for example. You can program any kind of recurring payments. So maybe your canister every month send like a small percentage to your family members, or like a DAO that you are part of, or it could also receive funds. Basically, you can program anything. So canisters are like next generation wallets. And the last most important part is that your wallet is actually accessible from anywhere. So even if you are not on your computer, but you still have access to your internet identity or other means of authentication, you can access your wallet because your wallet is actually stored in the cloud. So that makes a lot of possibilities for like integration with application, also backup. Like potential backup if you lose access to your wallet, social recovery. So there are many different projects that are looking into how to build a smart wallet. Just yesterday, NFID released the NFID Vault. So it's a smart wallet, but more for like organization, because it's a common wallet. So many people could have access to it. And I haven't looked too deep into it, but essentially it's for organization and DAOs to have a common treasury they can manage. And it's pretty secure. So I won't dive into the security assumption of ICP and how all of this is secured by consensus and like how the threshold DCDSA works, because we have a discussion on that later in the week. But to look into other chains, I feel like ICP is just a good level of security for 99% of use case. So I think the next generation of wallets will be canisters on the Internet computer. Once again, it's just my opinion, but future will tell us who is right. Last thing, you could also build a social network. So there are a few social networks built on ICP, like for example, Tagger, which I'll talk about later as well. Discover is another example. There was District, even though District is not maintained anymore due to funding issues and I think other like long-term issues with the project. But ICP is really good for building social application. The tricky part is what kind of social application do I build? Now I want to talk about how to become a great builder on ICP. Ask yourself every day when you wake up and you start to work on your app, what benefits do I get from moving my app entirely on the blockchain? Everything that can be built on ICP shouldn't be built on ICP. So actually think the other way around. What is not great to build on ICP? And so this is a common mistake that I see. I'm skipping this slide. A common mistake that I see is building Web2 on ICP. What I mean by that is copying an entire application. So the architecture of the application, the business model of the application, the functionalities of the application, like, you know, those applications that we all know, Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, copying that, putting that on ICP and thinking that just because it's decentralized, people will use it and it will work. I don't believe in this model. I think it's interesting from a developer point of view to build those things. Actually, I've built like copy of Web2 services just to train myself with like building on ICP and understanding the limitation and the possibilities. And also for existing company, maybe it's interesting to see how they can slowly transition to ICP. But if you are a builder and you really want to leverage ICP to the full potential, you have to think differently. The business model and the applications that work in Web2 are not the ones that are going to work in Web3. And that makes sense because usually those applications on a technical level, they have a large database, and large database on ICP is hard to replicate. So canisters have limitation. You are not able to build, like, at least at the moment, database with like terabytes of user data. Also, those models, whether it's on the business level or technical level, they are centralized. So essentially you centralize the read, write action of user into one single point. And you also centralize ownership. And that's the slide that I've skipped. Ownership is key. This is the key thing about Web3. When we have 2 minutes to summarize Web3, what is Web3? Web3 is read, write, and own. So before we just had read and write, now we have own. So this is this ownership property that you have to leverage. How can I leverage that? How can I make my user own a part of my application? How can I make my user maybe receive some compensation for actually participating in the application? And so if you go to those Web2 model, it's really hard to like implement this ownership from the get-go. Of course, you can still get there, and I believe this might be a path for some application that like already have traction in Web2 and they want to transition to Web3. For example, Reddit, they've tried a few things like with NFTs and drop, and they start to, I think they start to distribute some shares to their users at the moment. So they are kind of moving towards a DAO model So if you are like a CEO of a Web2 application, what I'm saying right now might not be applicable to you. What I'm saying is, if you are a builder, like think out of the box. Don't think about going to Web2 because going like Web2 because they are already like the market is saturated and it's not going to work the same way. And you have a kind of an opportunity to start from the Web3 side already, so you are getting ahead. So what are the types of architecture that works on ICP? There are many types of architecture that work, but if I would to summarize them, I would say first thing is to think about the user as a center, like really a center of the application. We have a few applications that use what I call the user canister model. This is something I'm super interested in. I think it's the direction and the future of most applications. So instead of thinking about your project as a platform, so essentially each user going to your platform, so going to your canister, like let me try to maybe make like you have your canister here, you have users going and writing and reading and so on. So this is like a Web2 type of architecture. Web3 type of architecture would be each user has its own canister. And so that's where they can store their data. They can essentially have ownership over this canister, so they own it. And instead of having a central place, it's a protocol that you define. So you define how each user is going to communicate with other users. So you define a protocol between all of those canisters, and you define how people exchange value, how people exchange communication within your app, so within your protocol. So you have to think in terms of protocol instead of a platform. And this is really hard to do. I got it. This is very like abstract and very like very advanced thinking. And so this can only be done when you are really working on an application. You have concrete example. I would like to show you maybe later in a future bootcamp a concrete example of what I mean. But essentially, this is like a key part that is missed by a lot of projects when they start on ICP. It's not too bad if you miss it because you can still trick your application and you don't have to get it right from the first like launch. You can get started with a more traditional architecture and then move to an extended architecture. There is also some cost associated with building some protocol like this. So maybe you don't want to build it from the get-go, but at some point, this is a direction that we are going, and this is where ICP really shine. With this flexible ownership model. And this means that each user is actually like not only owning, but also contributing to being part of the architecture of the application, which is pretty cool. So let's talk more concrete about a few applications that I really like on ICP and that I really recommend to study if you are starting in this ecosystem. I've listed 4 of them. There are, of course, way more, but those 4 applications, every time there is a specific reason for why you should study it. The first one is Tagger. And let me explain why I think Tagger is interesting and why you should study it. So maybe just 1 second. If you're not familiar with Tagger, this is a decentralized social media application. And it really started from really, I would say, a side project from a developer. So it was not more like there was not like a huge funding round. There was not a huge team coming up with a vision. It was more of a experimentation, which kind of picked up. And so why this application is interesting? This application is interesting because of the way it works. So the main thing is that Tagger goes kind of in the opposite direction of most social network. Most social network, they would like to have users posting as much as possible. Tagger, they make user pay every time you post. So it can seem a little bit strange, like why as a user would I go on Tagger to pay for posting things when I can go on other platform and I'm not paying? But if you think about it, it creates a much more positive environment because there is less incentive to like kind of post bad quality content. And there is also less incentive to just spam. And, you know, there are many, many problems in Web3 with people just posting on social media, Web3 social media to get like rewards and airdrops. And so if you have this protection, creates a much more positive environment. I think this is one of the reasons why it has been so appreciated in the ICP community. It's actually one of the most used application. And the second thing is the ownership and reward model they've implemented. So I'm not going to dive into it because we actually have Tiger coming later this week in the bootcamp. Well, we have members of Tigers that are coming, so there is not like a really there are some developers, but it's kind of open thing. So there is not one single person that represents Tiger now. What I've done is that there is an entire white paper that explains when do you receive rewards and when do you lose rewards. So it's like a game, basically, where the entire treasury of the application, and we can take a look at the dashboard. The entire treasury of the application is regularly distributed to the best users, and how the best users are defined is up to the DAO of Tiger and also to this white paper. So if you think about it, it's a really cool way of building from the ground up ownership and co-ownership model for the application, and rewarding users with like concrete treasury and concrete token whenever they positively impact the application. And it's built from the ground up, which is really cool. I think this is really cool because most application would first build an application and then think, okay, I'm going to reward people with token and I'm going to add the token layer. But it's much more interesting if it's from the ground up built in the application. And yeah, so that's why I think Tiger is interesting. This co-ownership model and also the experimentation kind of vibe that they have, where they just experiment and they are very open, very flexible. So it's not like there is a stuck model that they have to deal with. Now, the next one that I love is OpenChat. So I'm a big user of OpenChat. It's a messaging application on ICP. Well, probably all of you know because we have the Motoko Bootcamp group here. And so I'm not logged in here, but let's see. Okay, so OpenChat, why I love them is more of a technical reason than a kind of business reason. Tiger is more business, social type of interest. OpenChat is really about how they've built the application. I think it's one of the most technically advanced application on ICP because they use the multi-canister architecture. So this is something you might want to dive into. Every time you create a user profile on OpenChat, it's creating it's creating a canister specifically for you, which means they can scale way beyond the limit of one single canister. A canister is limited by like how many messages it can process per second, how many memory it can store. And just having one canister per user makes it super easy to create wallets for each user on the application. So essentially your messaging application is also your wallet. You can send token pretty easily on OpenChat. And even the group chats are one canister per group. So OpenChat on a technical level, this is very interesting application to study. Unfortunately, the code is in Rust, not in Motoko. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. But if you want to take a look at their architecture, you can read this part of their white paper. And it's more like high level. So it doesn't go into the code of it, but it goes into the architecture. And I think that's essentially what is interesting about OpenChat is really the architecture they've put in place and how far they've come at kind of reaching the limits of what's possible on ICP, at least right now. The next one is Dmail. So Dmail is actually an application that I don't have so much insight into how it works under the hood, but the thing is that they've started on ICP. and they've expanded to other chains. So this is something that I see a lot of mistake, I would say, from founders and developers. It's like, okay, I started on ICP, so it means I am part of the ICP community and I cannot move out elsewhere. I cannot expand my community. I'm in this ecosystem and my application is like ICP ICP this. And I don't think this is a model that works. We are moving in Web3 in general towards a multi-chain approach. And Dmail has really kind of nailed it because they have really went to like all ecosystem. So central part of their infrastructure is built on ICP. Actually, they are one of the applications that has the most deployed canister on ICP. So it's like a big application, but they've expanded to all other chains. And if you look at how many users they have, how many activity they have, they are really well ranked. And this is mainly because they've made it possible to come from any chain, even if ICP is a central part of their architecture. So this is why I would study it if I were looking to build something multi-chains. I would look into how to start on ICP, but then expand to other chains. This is something that I don't see enough those days. And the last one that I wanted to talk about is Loka mining. Loka mining is a super cool idea. It's essentially an attempt to decentralize the mining system on Bitcoin using ICP tech. So this one, I think, is really about like what I think is interesting about Loka is the leverage of ICP with previous knowledge. So let me explain. I think the most interesting opportunities will appear if you combine ICP with other existing technology or other existing area. So instead of being like 100% like, okay, I'm ICP focused, ICP centered, think about what previous skills you've learned in your previous work, what like area of expertise you have, and think about how this area can be improved by ICP. This is exactly what the team at Loka Mining has done. They are actually very deep into the Bitcoin mining ecosystem. And they've looked at ICP and they think, oh, there is this fundamental property, which means that we can actually decentralize Bitcoin mining. If they pull it off, I think it's just going to be amazing because one like central problem with Bitcoin is the centralization of mining. We often say like Bitcoin is the most decentralized asset. And this is true to some extent because the mining is really centralized. With this project, if they can decentralize the mining aspect and enable anyone like me, like you, to essentially fund and receive rewards for funding the Bitcoin mining, this will be a huge added value from ICP to another network. And so this is pretty big. Yeah, that's about it. So as you can see, I have chosen 4 applications to study. This is not the only applications built on ICP. Of course, there are way more than that, but each of them has a specific component that I really like. So just to remind you, Tiger, if you want to study it, you should study the white paper and how the incentives structure work. This is super cool experimentation. OpenChat, what is super cool is the technical infrastructure and architecture. They've already nailed it. Dmail, what is super cool about them is the multi-chain approach, like how they've started on ICP, but then expanded to other ecosystem. And Loka mining, it's really about the kind of deep knowledge of an industry and using that knowledge to build an innovative product on ICP. So if you are like, I don't know, if you are deep into agriculture, if you are deep into nanorobotics, if you're deep into what else, Ethereum developments, think about all the things, all the problems that you encounter in your daily job and how ICP could be used to create a new product or markets. And that's about it for this discussion. So send me some dApps ideas and I'll give you some advice. Keep in mind, this is just my opinion. I have seen so many, I've been in this ecosystem for a long time now, and I just love to study application and make like a prediction on if it's going to work, what is interesting. But again, it's just my opinion. Keep that in mind. So we have a few questions. What are the charges for deploying and canister creation? The minimum to pay for creating a canister is 1 trillion cycle, which is actually around $1.5. So this is true. This is a cost that you have to take into account if you build like a multi-canister architecture. But you can reuse canisters sometimes, so you could get it for cheaper. The cost of creation is 1 trillion, and then if you want to add more cycles, you can add more cycles as you need to. Is it possible to build apps on ICP that works on other chain? Right. Thanks to the reverse gas, could you build an Ethereum app that has no gas fee? Yes. Yes, that's a huge possibility for ICP application, is to essentially take make some Ethereum apps more accessible for users. The problem is that you would still have to pay the gas fees if you're interacting with Ethereum, but someone would have to pay. Maybe you can have the application itself paying for that. But ICP canisters can sign transaction on other networks. So you can have an ICP canister that is a wallet on Ethereum or wallet on Bitcoin. For example, one thing you could do is build trading platform that you can trade Bitcoin, ICP, Ethereum, and then you can move those funds whenever you need on the main chain. So you can use a canister as a layer 2 for Ethereum or layer 2 for Bitcoin. And that's a huge potential for it. I would like to talk about Bitfinity as well. They are launching pretty soon, I believe. If you're looking into EVM and ICP, you can take a look at Bitfinity. Bitfinity is a EVM built on ICP. So essentially, they are building a bridge, I would say, but like a bridge between ICP and Ethereum within one canister. So canisters are so powerful that you can actually have the entire blockchain of Ethereum and the entire EVM running within one canister. Since OpenChat is built on Rust rather than Motoko, how many other language can we use to build apps? I think they said 5 for the time being, but if I want to get a new CDK for another programming the language, for example, Dart, how can I do it? Yes, so since ICP is using WebAssembly, there are many languages that can be potentially used to build on ICP. So the main ones are Rust and Motoko, and then there is TypeScript, there is Python. You can also use C. Let me see. I'd like to show you so this is this page. You can take a look at this page. Those are the CDKs. So Hazel is the CDK for TypeScript. Kybera is the CDK for Python. Bitfinity, well, I've talked about it. C++ SDK. And so there is also the Rust one and the Motoko one. So that's at least 5 languages. If you want to start a new one, I would probably... Honestly, I would reach out to existing teams to see like the emergent labs. I would reach out to them and ask them how that would work. Yeah. Where do the projects host and version their code? Do they use GitHub? Yeah, most projects use GitHub. There is not an on-chain version for GitHub right now. I think it might come at some points, but that's just a huge project to build. So right now they use GitHub, which means that, it's kind of enough because you can still verify that the code running within one canister is actually the code published on GitHub. So you just have this verification that is done. But yeah, the management of the repository is still centralized in a sense. I believe the future is low code, no code, because lowering the barrier to entry will allow more people to turn their idea into dApps. Yes, I agree. Low code and no code is a great like opportunity. Many people that like don't necessarily have coding abilities have great ideas. Even though I feel like there is always going to be some technical aspect involved, even in the low code and no code, because you have to understand enough the technology that you can spot the opportunities. You don't necessarily have to know how to code and like how to make like a loop and algorithm and so on, but you have to understand how the technology works, because otherwise, how do you understand the opportunities? But yeah, great point. I think more about Bitcoin integration, create a special protocol for ordinals. Yes, so you're probably already familiar with Bionic, but Bionic is this ordinal marketplace and launchpad on ICP. And they essentially leverage the ICP Bitcoin integration to create what they call reserved ordinals, and then inscribe them on ordinals, so on Bitcoin, whenever they need. So it makes the user experience way cheaper, way faster, way more accessible. So you can try them out. And they are actually working on a cool NFT project for ICP and ordinals. I can share all the links. I don't know which one you were referring to, maybe the CDK, yeah. Let me see. Ah, it's here. I'm not sure how you are going to build the Dart CDK, just because I don't know how Dart will compile to WebAssembly. Maybe what you're looking is also agents, maybe because CDK and agents are different. So agents are just those tools that enables you to interact with a canister, not to build a canister, but to interact with a canister. And you have CDK for all languages. So like Dart, maybe that's what you are referring to. You could look into the IC Dart tools and agent Darts by Asterix. So those are two repositories. I'll send them to you. Yeah, probably you were more talking about the agents than the CDKs. Okay, everyone, hope that you've enjoyed this conversation. Let's close it here. We have introduction to chapter 3. Actually, we are already late, so let's just close it here. If you have any question, you have an idea for an app, you want some guidance, feel free to reach out to me. Even if I'm not always available, I'll try to give some guidance. And yeah, good luck with your project. Stay creative. Bye-bye.